Friday, 5:32 p.m. The school hallways are empty now. The laughter, the footsteps, the ringing of the last bell, all gone. Only the faint hum of a flickering light remains. Sato sits alone at her desk, surrounded by piles of ungraded papers. The clock ticks louder than her heartbeat. Her red pen rests on the desk, uncapped, a small drop of ink spreading like a wound. Outside, the sky has already turned gray. The rain slides down the classroom window in slow, tired streaks. She closes her eyes. For the first time in 10 years, she doesn't feel like a teacher, she just feels hollow. In the quiet, she whispers to herself, "Is this what burnout feels like?" The rain answers softly steady, unchanging. And for a moment, Sato realizes that somewhere between lesson plans and late nights, she lost herself. The rain kept falling, steady and cold. The smell of chalk still hung in the air. Rows of empty desks looked back at her like silent witnesses, each one a memory of a student she'd once cared for, a dream she'd once believed in. Sato leaned back in her chair. Her shoulders ached. Her eyes drifted to the class photo pinned to the notice board. 20 smiling faces, hers among them, the only one pretending. She remembered that morning clearly. The laughter, the forced energy, the small lie she told herself, "I'm fine." Her phone buzzed. A message from a coworker. "Staff dinner tonight. You coming?" Her thumb hovered over the screen. She typed, "Sorry, too tired," then deleted it, typed again, "Next time," and hit send. But she knew there wouldn't be a next time. The rain softened. Outside, students were long gone. The campus lights dimmed. She packed her things slowly, like someone leaving a life behind. The folder of essays felt heavier than it should. At the door, she paused, looked back one last time. The classroom seemed smaller, now a world that had once held her purpose, now just walls and silence. She turned off the light. The click echoed like a closing chapter. That night, she walked home beneath her umbrella, past the narrow streets of the city, her shoes splashing through shallow puddles. Neon signs blurred in the rain. Every reflection on the wet pavement looked like another version of herself, the one who used to care, the one who used to dream. When she reached her small apartment, the clock read 8:17 p.m. She dropped her bag, hung the soaked coat by the door, and sat down on the floor beside her bed. The silence pressed in like a second skin. For years, her life had been defined by other people's futures, students, grades, lessons. Now, she couldn't remember the last time she'd thought about her own. Her laptop sat open on the table, glowing softly. The blank document waited like it knew something she didn't. But she was too tired to write, too numb to think. All she could do was whisper into the stillness, "Something has to change." Outside, thunder rolled far away. And inside, for the first time in years, Sato allowed herself to cry. The days began to blur together. Morning light, coffee gone cold, the sound of the alarm she no longer needed. Sato still showed up to school, smiled at the students, answered emails, graded papers, but inside, everything was running on empty. Every night, when the city quieted, she sat by her small desk under the dim yellow light. The stack of essays beside her never seemed to shrink. Red marks bled across the pages, corrections, comments, encouragement, all written by a hand that no longer believed its own words. She had once loved this, the smell of chalk, the feeling of helping someone understand. But now it all felt like repetition, a story she kept rewriting, but never living. The rain returned that week, tapping softly on the glass. Sometimes she'd stop grading just to listen. There was something comforting about its rhythm, indifferent, yet constant. It made her feel less alone. At 2 a.m. one night, she stared at the last essay in the pile. A student had written, "One day, I want to do something that makes me feel alive." She put the paper down and whispered, almost afraid of her own voice, "Me too." That night, unable to sleep, Sato opened a small notebook she hadn't touched in years. Its pages were yellowed, filled with notes, sketches, and forgotten thoughts from her younger self back when she used to write stories for fun. Her hand hesitated, then moved. She began to write not about teaching, not about work, but about herself. The words came slow, uneven, like a broken faucet finally running again. She wrote about the exhaustion, the silence after the bell, The way the rain seemed to understand her better than people did. Hours passed without her noticing. By dawn, the pages were full, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel tired. She felt emptied, lighter. She closed the notebook and placed it beside her pillow. Outside, the sun was rising behind gray clouds. Sato took a deep breath, exhaled softly, and whispered, "Maybe I just needed to tell someone." The city was waking up, but inside that small apartment, something new was too, a quiet voice she had almost forgotten she had. It began quietly, just a thought, a late-night impulse. Sato sat at her laptop one weekend, scrolling through empty documents and unopened folders. The words from her notebook still lingered in her mind, honest, unfiltered, a voice she hadn't heard in years. She wasn't sure why, but she copied a few lines and opened a free blogging site. The title box blinked at her. She typed, "A teacher who forgot how to dream," then hesitated. Who would read it? Who would care? But she pressed publish anyway. Not for anyone else, just to let the words breathe outside her mind. Days passed. She forgot about it, buried again in schoolwork and exhaustion. But one evening, during another long grading session, her phone buzzed. One new comment, then 10, then hundreds. People from around the world, teachers, nurses, parents, students, writing things like, "This is exactly how I feel. Thank you for putting it into words." I thought I was the only one. She stared at the screen in disbelief. Her heart raced not from fear, but from recognition. Strangers saw her, understood her. Night after night, she began to write again. Short reflections about exhaustion, kindness, failure, and the small beauty hidden in everyday survival. She didn't plan or polish them. She simply told the truth. Her posts spread fast. People began sharing them on forums, quoting her words, calling her the teacher who writes like she's whispering. But not everyone understood. At school, a coworker mentioned, "Hey, there's this viral post about burnout going around, probably exaggerated." Sato smiled faintly. Probably, she said, hiding the truth behind her calm expression. Still, when she came home each night, she felt something waiting for her, not the fatigue, but a pulse. A small growing spark. She began to see her life differently. The same rain outside the window now sounded softer. The silence didn't feel so cruel. Her pain had turned into connection. And one morning, as she checked her inbox over coffee, a message appeared from an unknown sender. Subject, "Your words moved me, let's talk." It was from a magazine editor. She froze, read it twice, then a third time. It said, "Your writing captures what so many are afraid to say. Would you consider publishing a piece with us?" Her hands trembled above the keyboard. She wanted to reply, but the old voice in her head whispered, "You're not a writer. You're just tired." Sato closed her eyes. The city outside was waking again. Buses passing, children laughing, rain still falling. And in that sound, she heard something new. The faint heartbeat of a second chance. She didn't reply that day or the next. For 3 nights, Sato stared at the email like it was a doorway she wasn't sure she deserved to walk through. The blinking cursor in her draft reply felt like a heartbeat impatient, waiting. Every time she began to type, the same thoughts returned. What if I fail? What if I'm not good enough? But then she remembered all those comments, hundreds of strangers saying her words had helped them breathe again. Maybe she wasn't just writing for herself anymore. So on the 4th night, she took a breath and typed, "Thank you for reaching out. I've never written professionally before, but I'd love to try." She clicked send and sat in the quiet that followed the kind of silence that feels alive. The editor replied the next morning, "We'll guide you through it. Just be yourself. That's what people connect with." The assignment was simple. A short article about her experience as a teacher dealing with burnout. But to Sato, it felt enormous, like rewriting her own story in front of the world. She spent nights hunched over her laptop, the glow painting soft light across her small apartment. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the air still smelled of it fresh, cleansing. Her fingers hesitated above the keys. Then she began. She wrote about the exhaustion, the endless cycle of giving until nothing was left. She wrote about silence, about the emptiness of going home to walls that didn't answer. And finally, she wrote about the moment she started writing again, how it saved her. The piece was published a week later. She read it on her phone during her lunch break, surrounded by the noise of the teacher's lounge. No one there knew it was her. Her hand shook slightly as she scrolled through the comments, people thanking her, crying, confessing their own stories. It was overwhelming, beautiful, real. That night, she took the long way home. The city lights shimmered in puddles left by yesterday's storm. She felt something stirring deep inside, a quiet pride she hadn't known in years. When she reached her door, she saw her reflection in the window. The same tired eyes, but softer now, lighter. She whispered to herself, "I think I'm becoming someone new." And maybe for the first time, she smiled without forcing it. Weeks turned into months. The magazine article brought new messages, invitations, and opportunities, small at first, then more frequent. People wanted her words. They wanted her. At school, the same rhythm continued. Bells, classes, parent meetings, essays. But Sato had changed. Her heart was no longer there. Each morning, as she stood before the whiteboard, her mind drifted to the stories she hadn't written, yet the world's waiting behind a blinking cursor. One afternoon, between lessons, she opened her phone and saw a new email from the editor. "We'd love to offer you a monthly column. If you're ready to write full-time, we'll make it happen." Her breath caught. Full-time, writing. The room felt suddenly smaller. The sound of students laughing in the hallway faded, replaced by the soft hum of possibility. She looked at her classroom, the desks, the chalk dust, the fading posters on the wall. So much of her life had happened here. But she realized something. It wasn't where her story ended. It was where it began. That night, she wrote her resignation letter. No grand speeches, no explanations, just quiet honesty. "Thank you for letting me teach. But I need to learn how to live again." Her last day was in late March when the cherry blossoms began to bloom. She stayed after everyone left, standing alone by the window, watching petals drift across the empty schoolyard. They looked like snow, gentle, fleeting, beautiful. She whispered, "Goodbye." And it didn't hurt as much as she thought it would. Now her mornings began differently. Sunlight instead of alarms. The sound of typing instead of bells. Tea instead of coffee. She still woke early, but not out of duty, out of excitement. The words came easily now. Her small apartment filled with the soft clatter of keys, the rustle of printed drafts, the quiet hum of creation. Sometimes she still dreamed of her classroom, the laughter, the noise. But she no longer felt guilt for leaving. She realized she had never stopped teaching. She was just teaching through stories now. Thousands read her columns each week. Some wrote to her, saying her words helped them find courage, or peace, or a way to start again. Sato printed one message and taped it to her wall. It read, "You don't just write, you remind people they're still human." She stared at it every morning before she wrote a small ritual, a quiet prayer of gratitude. Her world had become smaller, yet infinitely wider. She had traded the classroom for the page and found freedom in the space between them. It was early, the kind of morning when the world still feels half asleep. The air was cool, filled with the faint scent of rain from the night before. Sato sat by her desk, a cup of green tea steaming beside her laptop. No deadlines, no bell, no weight pressing on her chest, just silence and possibility. She opened a new document. The blank page didn't intimidate her anymore. It felt like an old friend, one that listened without judgment. For a while, she just watched the morning light creep across her desk, soft gold over stacks of notebooks and half-finished drafts. She thought about how far she had come, from the fluorescent-lit classroom to this quiet room, from exhaustion to peace, from surviving to living. Her fingers began to move. She wrote about fear, how it used to live inside her like a shadow, whispering that she wasn't enough. Then she wrote about courage, not the loud kind, but the quiet act of showing up for yourself every day. As the words flowed, she realized something. Writing had never been about success. It was about remembering who she was and sharing that truth with the world. The clock ticked softly. Birds sang outside her window. And for the first time in years, she wasn't writing to escape. She was writing because she was free. She smiled, a small, unguarded smile, and whispered to the page, "Maybe this is what healing sounds like." Her phone buzzed a new message from her editor. "Your next piece moved me to tears. You've found your voice, Sato." She looked out of the window. The sky was clearing. She closed her eyes, letting the sunlight touch her face. Once she thought losing her career meant losing herself. Now she knew the truth. Sometimes life has to fall apart so you can write it back together. The rain had stopped. The silence felt warm. And in that quiet, steady morning, Sato began typing again, this time without fear.